Something happened in that deposition room that no one saw coming, not even Blake Lively herself. The carefully curated image the press tours the poise, all of it seemed to crumble in real time. As the pressure built, the cameras weren't rolling. But the word is out, and now we know more than ever before this isn't just about legal filings or celebrity gossip anymore. It's about what happens when the pressure of power, control, and narrative finally collide. It's about what happens when someone known for grace and glamour is finally faced with the one thing they can't outmaneuver: the truth. In a stunning turn of events, reports from those close to the legal battle have revealed a deposition so chaotic, so emotionally charged that even Lively's own team looked blindsided. What started as a tightly managed appearance intended to reaffirm her claims and reset the public narrative has reportedly devolved into a session marked by contradictions, long pauses, tears, and a general unraveling that stunned both sides of the aisle. And the consequences of what unfolded behind closed doors are already spilling out into the open. Justin Baldoni, who up until this point had remained steadfast in his pursuit of legal justice, is now quietly hinting to his team and inner circle that the case may not even need to go to full trial. The fallout from that deposition might have delivered him a bigger victory than any ruling could. That's how big this moment is. This wasn't just another celebrity answering questions under oath. This was a decisive moment that may reshape everything that's come before it. In this video, we're unpacking every angle of what reportedly took place inside that room, from the leaks and rumors to the confirmed whispers that have legal analysts reeling and fans on both sides scrambling for answers. We're breaking down the courtroom strategy that appears to have backfired, the body language that spoke volumes, the moments that allegedly caused Lively to pause, break, and reset, and how this deposition could become the pivotal moment in the entire Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni legal saga. There's also the PR fallout that's happening right now as we speak. The advisors distancing themselves, the public statements that are being quietly rewritten, the media insiders who are no longer offering defense lines. The story is shifting, and for perhaps the first time, Blake Lively no longer seems in control of the narrative. From legal experts to crisis managers, everyone is now watching closely to see how this next chapter unfolds, because when someone as high profile and as carefully packaged as Lively begins to show cracks in a legal setting, the ripple effect is massive. We're diving deep into what it all means, what's next, and whether Baldoni is really ready to walk away from the case, or whether this is all part of a much bigger endgame strategy. Buckle up, because this is the kind of twist that changes everything, and we've got every detail ready for you in the high-stakes world of Hollywood legal battles, where reputation is currency and public perception can dictate careers. The deposition of Blake Lively was always going to be a pivotal moment, but no one expected what actually happened behind those closed doors. According to multiple sources with knowledge of the session, initially Lively arrived at the deposition location looking polished, prepared, and perfectly briefed. Her legal team maintained a calm front, cameras were stationed outside, and media had gathered in anticipation. Although no live coverage was permitted inside, however, things quickly began to unravel. According to insiders familiar with the proceeding, what began as a straightforward series of questions soon turned into a labyrinth of follow-ups that Lively reportedly struggled to navigate. There were long pauses, responses that required clarification, and according to two sources, at least one moment where the actress appeared visibly shaken and asked to take a break. It's worth noting that depositions are not casual conversations. These are sworn statements under oath, often involving meticulous legal strategy and careful wording. Any inconsistency or contradiction can be used later in court or even leaked strategically in the media. And while it's not unusual for deponents to feel pressure, what reportedly unfolded with Lively is something even seasoned lawyers are calling extraordinary. One of the first major shocks came when Lively was asked about her communications with certain public relations advisors, documents that had previously been requested in discovery, but were only partially submitted. According to those familiar with the exchange, Lively was asked to clarify timelines about when specific statements were crafted for the press and who authorized them. This is standard in high-profile legal matters, but what made it significant here was Lively's reported hesitancy in recalling key details. Sources say her responses were often vague or contradictory, leading one attorney present to raise concerns about the accuracy of her memory or the possibility of intentional omission. It's unclear whether the attorneys will pursue sanctions or further subpoenas based on this moment, but what is clear is that something in that line of questioning rattled the actress. Then came the subject of her text messages. According to reports, this was the section of the deposition where the mood shifted dramatically. It had long been speculated that there were private messages between Lively and multiple parties that could reveal more than just her perspective on the case, including potential influence campaigns or off-the-record strategy sessions. When questioned about specific threads, Lively reportedly paused several times, looked to her counsel, and even asked whether she was obligated to answer. The attorney conducting the deposition reminded her that she was under oath, and that a failure to answer could result in a motion to compel that. When, according to multiple people present, the energy in the room changed, Lively's demeanor reportedly shifted from composed to visibly distressed, and her tone lost its usual confidence. These aren't descriptions meant to sensationalize what happened, but rather to emphasize just how much of a turning point this deposition may become for the case. Observers present described the room as tense, with Lively's own team noticeably exchanging glances and conferring during breaks. One notable moment came when she was asked about a phone call she allegedly made to an unnamed party the night before a major press release was issued by her team. The call had been referenced in other evidence, and while the content of that call isn't fully known yet, Lively's reaction to being questioned about it was reportedly one of the most emotionally charged moments of the entire session. According to someone briefed on the deposition, she grew visibly frustrated, reportedly saying that she was trying her best to remember everything and that the legal scrutiny was taking a toll on her personally. This is not uncommon in contentious legal battles, but when the stakes involve not just legal outcomes but brand partnerships and long-standing public trust, every reaction gets amplified. And that's exactly what's happening now. Publicists close to the situation have quietly begun recalibrating their positioning with Lively behind the scenes. According to one source, a luxury brand she was recently associated with has paused upcoming collaborative posts on social media, citing the need for space as the legal matter unfolds. That's not a formal distancing move yet, but it's a sign that the aftershocks of the deposition are being felt already. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni's legal team is said to be feeling cautiously optimistic. Insiders say they believe the deposition has provided enough contradictions or weaknesses to build a stronger case without needing to push forward with a full public trial. Some are even saying Baldoni himself has floated the idea of dismissing the case on the condition that certain statements be retracted or that a confidential agreement be reached. That remains speculative for now, but the very fact that such a suggestion has surfaced indicates just how significant Lively's performance under oath may have been. It's also raised questions about the strategy behind Lively's legal positioning. Was she genuinely underprepared, or was the pressure simply too great? Is it possible her team underestimated how much evidence would be brought to bear, or how much emotional impact this process would carry? Whatever the case, the perception now is that cracks are beginning to show, and in an industry built on polish, those cracks are often seen as unacceptable. That said, it would be premature to declare this case over. The legal system does not operate based on headlines or speculation. There are still motions on the table, and more depositions may be scheduled, but as of now, one thing is clear: Blake Lively's deposition has fundamentally altered the energy and direction of this case, and whether by design or by emotional exhaustion, what she revealed in that room may carry more weight than any public statement or red carpet moment ever could. As the days passed following Blake Lively's emotionally charged deposition, the silence from her camp spoke volumes for someone so often in control of the narrative. The absence of a swift public statement or social media post addressing the rumors was uncharacteristic. Insiders began noticing the shift immediately. Unlike past moments of controversy where her team was quick to clarify, spin, or redirect attention, this time there was only stillness. That vacuum created the perfect storm for speculation, and legal analysts began weighing in on what might really be going on behind the scenes. Multiple sources close to the situation confirmed that Lively's team had gone into what one attorney called damage control mode internally, scheduling emergency briefings with their communications consultants, and reviewing the transcript of the deposition line by line, looking for vulnerabilities. The general consensus among those reviewing the document was that the deposition had not gone in her favor, and that certain answers had created more legal exposure than expected. What made this even more notable was how quickly those ripples began to reach the public sphere. A few high-profile journalists who had previously received tips from Lively's team suddenly stopped receiving updates. As one media insider put it, the faucet was turned off overnight. It became clear that even her own team didn't know how to manage the fallout. The Hollywood ecosystem relies on access, control, and polished narratives, but when that machinery grinds to a halt, everyone starts asking questions, and that's exactly what was happening as the uncertainty grew. So did the chatter around Justin Baldoni's next steps, though his team has stayed publicly restrained since the deposition? Several sources with knowledge of his legal strategy revealed that Baldoni is now in a position of considerable leverage. That leverage doesn't just come from Lively's perceived missteps, but from how the deposition aligns with existing evidence, particularly private communications, that had already been submitted to the court. What's become clear is that several points raised during the deposition appear to contradict earlier public statements made by Lively or her representatives, and that contradiction could open the door for additional legal avenues, including counterclaims, while Baldoni's attorneys have not confirmed whether they will pursue that route. Sources indicate that all options are being evaluated, but perhaps the most intriguing development is the growing talk from within Baldoni's inner circle about the possibility of settling or even dropping the case entirely under the right conditions. At first glance, that might seem counterintuitive given the momentum that now appears to be on his side, but those who know Baldoni well have said from the beginning that this legal journey was never about spectacle or revenge, and that if the truth was clearly revealed and accountability even partially achieved, he may see little value in dragging the process out further. That approach is consistent with the public image Baldoni has carefully cultivated over the years, one rooted in integrity, transparency, and emotional intelligence. Still, there are risks involved in walking away now, especially when the tide is turning so clearly in his favor. And that's where the strategic tension lies for Baldoni. The question may no longer be whether he can win, but whether continuing the fight serves any further purpose, or worse, whether it risks appearing vindictive when the legal advantage is already his. That calculus is not just legal but deeply personal, and it's further complicated by the fact that this case has now transcended the courtroom. It's become a full-blown media spectacle, with implications that reach far beyond the initial dispute between two high-profile figures. The broader industry is watching and quietly recalibrating their relationships with both parties. According to one high-level agent, to endorsement deals that had been in the works for Lively have now stalled pending further developments. That's a significant shift, and it signals that stakeholders are nervous about being associated with unresolved controversy, especially one that appears to be unraveling so quickly. And it's not just brands that are stepping back. Several public figures who had previously shown support or solidarity online have quietly deleted posts or limited comments in anticipation of potential backlash. The atmosphere is now one of caution, and even some of Lively's peers are choosing to remain silent rather than risk association with a narrative that feels increasingly unstable. Meanwhile, the online discourse is intensifying, with fans, commentators, and legal experts dissecting every detail that has emerged since the deposition. Theories abound about what exactly triggered the breakdown and whether more damaging evidence might still be forthcoming. Some believe the emotional reaction was purely the result of legal pressure. Others speculate that it stemmed from personal conflict, perhaps even regret over how certain decisions were handled early in the process. While it's impossible to know the truth without full access to the deposition transcript, what's undeniable is that the event has become a cultural moment in itself. It's rare for celebrity depositions to generate this level of attention, and rarer still for them to trigger real-world consequences so quickly. But that's exactly what's happening here, and it's a reminder of how fragile public image can be in the age of digital scrutiny. Even the most carefully protected figures are vulnerable when the truth no longer aligns with the narrative. And that vulnerability is now playing out in real time for Blake Lively in legal circles. The deposition is already being used as a case study for how not to manage high-profile litigation. Multiple attorneys have pointed out that Lively's team appeared overconfident going into the session and may have underestimated both the skill of Baldoni's legal team and the cumulative power of the evidence arrayed against them. That kind of miscalculation is common in celebrity legal battles, but it's particularly risky when the client is as high-profile and publicly polished as Lively. And once credibility begins to erode, it becomes incredibly difficult to restore. For Baldoni's part, there appears to be no rush to declare victory or take a public victory lap. Instead, he has reportedly continued to emphasize the importance of process and truth, privately acknowledging that while the deposition marked a turning point, it's not the end of the story. Whether he ultimately decides to move forward with the trial, seek a settlement, or walk away remains to be seen, but the leverage is undeniably his. And that shift in power dynamic is perhaps the most profound outcome of this chapter. What began as a legal standoff has now become something much more complex, a reputational reckoning with long-term consequences for both parties, and a clear signal to Hollywood at large that no amount of fame or polish can shield someone from the reality of legal accountability. As the public continues to digest the fallout and the legal teams regroup, the next moves by both parties will be watched closely. But if this deposition is any indication, the road ahead will be anything but smooth for Blake Lively. The question now is not just how to recover legally but whether her brand can survive the damage. That's already been done, and for Justin Baldoni the question is whether justice as he envisioned it has already been served or if the final chapter still needs to be written. As the shockwaves from the deposition continued to ripple through the industry, those closest to the situation began to notice a shift in Blake Lively's inner circle. For years, she had been surrounded by a carefully chosen network of advisors, stylists, publicists, and image managers, all of whom had played a key role in shaping her public identity. But now that network appeared to be shrinking rapidly. Sources familiar with the matter say that several longtime associates began distancing themselves, not necessarily out of personal betrayal but rather professional concern. As one insider put it, the brand has become too volatile to manage effectively. And when your entire career is built on consistency, volatility is the kiss of death. What made this shift even more stunning was how quickly it occurred. Within 72 hours of the deposition concluding, at least two brand partners had reportedly halted campaigns that were scheduled to feature Lively prominently. The language being used behind the scenes was diplomatic, citing timing and scheduling issues. But everyone in the business understood what it really meant. In Hollywood, silence is never neutral. It's a message of pause, reevaluation, or retreat, and when it happens so suddenly, it signals that something fundamental has changed, and change it has. Even Lively's own legal team has reportedly found themselves re-strategizing not just their approach to the ongoing case but how to protect their clients' standing in the court of public opinion, according to two individuals with direct knowledge of the situation. Internal meetings have been dominated not by legal minutiae but by crisis communications playbooks. The question isn't just how to recover from a tough deposition but whether recovery is even possible. When the narrative has begun spiraling out of control, what's become increasingly clear is that this is no longer a straightforward legal dispute. It's a test of resilience, reputation, and control. The psychological toll of that kind of exposure is enormous, and those around Lively have reportedly grown concerned about her ability to continue presenting a strong front. Multiple sources confirm that she has withdrawn from several upcoming public appearances, and while her team claims these moves were planned in advance, few believe that narrative anymore. The timing is too precise, the absences too strategic, and the silence too loud. Meanwhile, on the other side of the courtroom, Justin Baldoni has been methodically consolidating support. While he has yet to make any public declaration regarding the future of the case, those close to him say that the deposition gave him clarity not just legally but emotionally. For Baldoni, who entered this process with a clear goal of accountability, the events of that day reportedly validated many of the concerns he had been privately carrying for months. That sense of validation is powerful, and it's part of what makes his next move so significant. Some believe he may now pursue a form of moral resolution over legal closure, opting for a private agreement that allows the truth to be acknowledged without further courtroom spectacle. Others, however, argue that the damage already inflicted cannot be undone and that only a full trial can provide the transparency needed to set the record straight. That debate is now happening in real time behind the scenes, with Baldoni's advisors divided over the best path forward. Some believe that withdrawing the case now would show grace and maturity, while others warn that doing so might allow false narratives to persist or re-emerge later. If there's one thing both sides seem to agree on, it's that the deposition marked a definitive shift in tone and momentum. No one expected Lively to be so visibly affected, and no one predicted just how damaging that appearance would become, especially when viewed in conjunction with other evidence already in the record. What's also become apparent is that the broader public is beginning to turn. A growing number of voices online, once neutral or supportive of Lively's position, are now asking harder questions, digging deeper, and refusing to accept the surface level answers that might have sufficed in earlier phases of the dispute. That kind of public awakening can be devastating for a public figure whose image has been largely unblemished for over a decade. And the fact that it's happening so quickly underscores just how fragile the foundation really was. In many ways, the Lively brand was built on control. She controlled the narrative, the messaging, the access, the partnerships. Everything was curated, every move considered, every post polished. But depositions strip away that control. They expose, they challenge, they force confrontation with reality. And once the curtain is pulled back, it becomes nearly impossible to reset the stage. That's the position she now finds herself in, and those advising her know it, whether they admit it publicly or not. The focus has shifted from managing a crisis to surviving it, and survival in this context means minimizing further damage, even if that means accepting painful truths privately instead of denying them publicly. Meanwhile, Baldoni's legal team continues to review their options. The deposition reportedly revealed inconsistencies not just in Lively's verbal testimony, But in the broader timeline of events presented by her legal side, those inconsistencies could potentially be grounds for deeper investigation or at the very least new discovery requests. Some legal analysts speculate that Baldoni may now have enough leverage to request documents or communications that were previously withheld on technical grounds, and if those materials align with what was hinted at in the deposition, the case could take on an entirely new dimension. It's no longer just about what was said in that room, but what it might lead to, what doors it might open, and what truths it might ultimately expose. For now, both camps remain relatively quiet, but the silence is filled with movement. Teams are working tirelessly behind the scenes to recalibrate strategy, rework messaging, and anticipate the next big development. And make no mistake, another development is coming, whether it's a settlement announcement, a surprise court filing, or another public statement. The next chapter is already being written. The only question is who will write it first, and how much control they'll really have over its reception. The balance of power has shifted, the narrative has fractured, and for the first time in this long and winding legal battle, the outcome no longer feels like a foregone conclusion. It feels like a reckoning, a moment of unavoidable truth that neither side can fully contain. What happens next will depend not just on legal strategy, but on emotional intelligence, public perception, and the ability to accept reality even when it's inconvenient. And in the high-wire act of celebrity legal drama, that kind of acceptance is rare. The safer route is often denial, spin, or deflection, but what this case is showing in real time is that sometimes the only way out is through, and that means facing the fallout, owning the missteps, and accepting that not every story can be perfectly managed or manipulated. Sometimes the truth shows up in the most inconvenient ways, like a single moment in a deposition that shatters the illusion and forces everyone to see what's really been going on all along. The dust hasn't even settled, but the consequences of Blake Lively's deposition are already echoing far beyond the courtroom. What was intended to be a routine legal proceeding has instead become a public turning point that peeled back the curtain on how fragile control can be, even for someone who once seemed untouchable. From the moment whispers of her unraveling surfaced, the conversation around her changed. No longer was she simply the poised public figure navigating a legal challenge. She became something much more complex, a person under pressure, reacting in real time to the weight of her own choices, and that complexity, while deeply human, carries real consequences in a world where reputation and narrative are everything. Justin Baldoni, on the other hand, finds himself in a position few thought possible at the start of this ordeal. With the public now witnessing a dramatic shift in tone and balance, Baldoni's quiet determination and consistent messaging have begun to pay off. The deposition, without any grand speeches or public declarations, may have handed him the moral high ground and the legal leverage he needed all along. But what he chooses to do with that leverage remains to be seen. Will he press forward toward a courtroom battle that could further damage reputations and deepen the divide? Or will he take the strategic path of resolution, seeking a private outcome that allows both parties to move on? What's undeniable is that the power dynamics in this case have shifted. Lively's team is on the defensive, reeling from the fallout and desperately working to contain the narrative. Brands are backing away, allies are falling silent. Even the media, once cautious in how they framed her story, is beginning to turn. The illusion of control is slipping, and with every passing day, the pressure to address what happened inside the deposition room grows stronger. This story, while centered around high-profile figures, reflects a larger truth about celebrity culture, image management, and the harsh light of legal accountability. No matter how carefully you build your public persona, when the truth surfaces, especially under a weight that carries weight, it rewrites perception, and it changes the game. The next chapter is still unwritten. Both Lively and Baldoni now face choices that will define not only the resolution of this case, but the public's lasting impression of their character. Whether the courtroom sees more action or the story quietly concludes behind closed doors, the impact of this moment will linger.